Hi, my name is Pam and I read a lot of books. But one thing that I've noticed is that whenever I hear about a book and I think I am going to love this book, I tend to put it off for a long time. I've done that with a lot of books that I ended up reading, and then I was like, I think I built this up so much for so long in my head that it didn't live up to the expectations that I had for this. But then I've also done the opposite, where I wait forever and then I read it and I'm like, why did I wait so long? This was a perfect book and I wish I would have read it a long time ago. And there's a crazy amount of books in my TBR, and a good amount of those have been sitting there for years, and there's a lot of them that I think I'm going to love. And every time I see somebody talk about it or post about that book, I'm like, I need to read this book. I know I'm gonna love it. Why haven't I read this book? So I thought that for the next couple of days / weeks ? I would read books that I think are going to be 5 stars and see how well I know my taste and see if I should just trust my instinct more and not put off these books for such a long time. Let me tell you about the books that I'm going to read over the next couple weeks. These books have all been on my TBR for at least a year, probably closer to 2 or 3. 2 of them I have physical copies of, and then one of them is on my Kindle. So the 2 that I have with me are Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This one is kind of a cheat because I have seen the movie, and I feel like usually I like the book better than the movie, and I loved the movie, so I'm like, I'm sure I'm gonna love the book. And it's been a long time since I watched the movie. I watched it in high school when I was going through a deep Andrew Garfield phase, which frankly I never left. Everybody moved on, I stayed there. So I feel like I should finally read the book. The other physical book that I have with me is Notes on an Execution by Dania Kukovka. This book, I don't know, I've just heard really great things about it. The premise sounds super interesting to me, and some book talkers, book YouTubers that I really like and trust love this book. So I have a feeling that I am also going to love this book. And then the third one that I have on my Kindle is Babel. I feel like if I do like this as much as I think I'm going to like it, I'll probably end up picking up the physical copy, but just for time's sake, I have the library book on my Kindle. It is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This one, like Notes on Execution, I have just heard great things about. I read Yellowface and I loved, and I really love the dark academia, dark fantasy genres. So I just know I'm gonna love this. So yes, those are the 3 books that I plan on reading that I think will most likely be 5-star reads for me. And yeah, let's just get into it. How well do I know my own taste? I think because I am also making a concerted effort to read my physical TBR before I go out and buy more books, which I'm always trying to do. I think I'm going to start with one of my physical copies, and I think I'm going to start with Notes on an Execution because this is one that I've picked up several times, and for one reason or another, I never get around to finishing it. Frankly, I never get around to reading more than 1 chapter, but I need to because I'm gonna love it and I want to buy more books. So I need to read my physical TBR. So we'll start with this one and see how that goes. Okay, so we have officially begun the work week. It is Monday morning. Last night got away from me. I was only able to get through 30 pages, but damn, those pages, they packed a punch. Before I get too ahead of myself, I wanted to just talk a little bit about this book and the premise of it. So this is a literary fiction book that follows a man who is in prison. He is on death row, and it is his last day of life. He is about to be executed. And we learn about him, his story, and then we also get glimpses into some women in his life. I'm not sure who these women specifically are. I don't know if they're his victims, but I'm 30 pages in, and one of the first women that we're going to start exploring is his mother. So we start off from his point of view, and then it flashes back to his mother and when he was born and a child, and that's as far as I've gotten so far. The writing already so beautiful. Obviously, this isn't like a very beautiful setting book. I mean, so far we've been in a prison and in the farmhouse where he was born and grew up out in the middle of nowhere. And his story in childhood was one of poverty and abuse and trauma. So it's not a beautiful picture that Dania is painting, but the writing is stunning. Just right off the bat, beautiful writing, and it really puts you in an emotional and fraught headspace. So yeah, I'm already very sucked in, 30 pages in. So I am continuing through the story. I think I'm about, not quite halfway, but almost. And in terms of vibes and whether I'm enjoying the writing, the atmosphere, the story so far, yes, 100%. It is captivating. At this point, we've gotten through, I think, all of the POVs that we're going to get. We've established who the main players of this story are. And the way that it's structured, whenever we're in Ansel's POV, each chapter is counting down the hours until his scheduled execution time. And then in between those chapters, we get POVs from the women in his life. So we have 3 women, and at this point we've kind of established who they are, how they're connected to him, and I think now we're just gonna dive deeper into those. And obviously those chapters and these women are kind of like the heart of the story, and then the Ansel chapters are just kind of moving the story along to this big climactic moment of his death and how he's feeling and reflecting on the choices that he's made. And I really appreciate that it's not, trying to make us super sympathetic towards him, or, that it's not 100% from his point of view, because I think this is kind of something that's like a hot topic now with true crime having this big moment in culture recently, and then now we're kind of reckoning with that and what it means to be obsessed with true crime and be so hyper focused on these deplorable men. And I think now that conversation is kind of shifting to center the victims, and it's not trying to justify his actions. It's not trying to make him a very misunderstood character. Is just examining who is affected by this man's violent actions, and is it justified? No. Is it complicated? Yes. And yeah, I'm really loving these women's point of views, and right now I can't really tell if it's going to be a 5-star read for me. I'm really loving it. I think it has the potential. Obviously, an ending has potential of completely ruining a reading experience, but I know
it's not going to be like a 1 or 2 star read. I definitely am enjoying it so far. Okay, so it has officially been a day now that I've been sitting with this book, and I think I'm going to call it right now. It was a 5-star read for me, so 1 out of 3 so far has been a 5-star. So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling confident about my picks and about just knowing what is going to hit with me. I think my expectations were pretty much met with what I thought this book was going to do and what I hoped it would do. And it did so in a very beautiful way. I was recording myself finishing the book and my memory card was full, so it stopped recording. And I'm kind of glad it did because I was like a sobbing mess by the end of the book. And I don't want to see what that looks like because it was bad. But yeah, after that, like, there's no way that I couldn't give that book 5 stars because it hit me so hard. It was so beautiful. I don't want to like get too much into it because I think going in fresh is kind of part of the experience. I did end up tabbing a bunch of things that I liked, but there is this section in the back after the book that I really liked, where Dania Kukafka is talking about her inspiration and why she chose to write this book. And I do want to read a part of this because it's pretty much the thesis of the book and what I hoped that it would explore. So she starts off by saying, "The story of the American serial killer is one we know by heart. I've long wondered what fascinates us about evil men, even as the word evil strikes me as diminutive. It's so simple, so final. I suspect there are very few people in the world who wake up in the morning and decide to be bad. Perhaps it is this contradiction that holds us captive, rather than the serial killers themselves. Even so, I'm baffled by this myth, a uniquely American fiction we have glorified for decades. Average men becoming interesting when they start hurting women." And then she talks about why she started thinking about this. She was saying that even to this day, we still talk about and mystify and glorify people like Ted Bundy, people like John Wayne Gacy, the heavy hitters, the serial killers we all know and continue to talk about. And she says, "There is a universe out there made up of girls and women, stranded by a fiction we insist upon repeating. I wrote this book to give them a chance to exist beyond the men who steal the narrative. The story of the serial killer is bigger than the bodies he leaves behind. It encompasses an infinite web, an elaborate tangle of predominantly female trauma and endurance. There is a question lurking in the dark corners of that weary tale. I wrote this novel because I needed to ask. I needed to look. I am tired of seeing Ted Bundy's face. This is a book for the women who survive." Just a beautiful book full of questions that go unanswered, to be honest, because Dania Kukafka is not making any kind of moral judgments. She's not heavy-handed with any of the themes, and there's not a solid answer to the question about morality, the question about good versus evil, like what makes us one versus the other. Is there a gray area? Is there a definitive answer? There's not, and this book doesn't try to answer that, but it just kind of lays out the questions and presents you with some evidence, presents you with the stories, and lets you kind of come up with the judgment yourself. But I do like that we did explore the aspect of the justice system a little bit. I was having some moral questions about, my own thoughts about the criminal justice system at the beginning because I was really loving and connecting with Safi's story. Safi is a cop. She's a detective. So I was having some trouble with like really connecting with Safi and really liking her story, but also like knowing where I stand on that issue. And people within the system can have those questions as well. He was questioning, like, what is my role in all of this? Like, am I doing more harm than good by participating in the system? And I'm glad that that was explored as well. She also posed a question about the death penalty itself. Like, what is this all for? Contributing to this, like, weird cycle of humiliation, and it's just like a spectacle. And it really is depraving people of humanity, but it's like, do those people deserve to have their humanity still acknowledged and preserved? It's not an easy question to answer, and I think this book does a great job of just making you think about it. So yeah, very, very beautiful, but very, very heavy and tragic, but great, great book that I'm glad that I finally got to, and I'm taking off my physical TBR shelf for good, but I definitely won't be forgetting about it anytime soon, and I do recommend. I think now I will be moving on to Babel. So, shifting vibe, although I think it'll still be dark and thought provoking because I guess that's just like one of my factors for a 5-star read. Since I have it on a Kindle, I don't have like a physical representation of how long the book it is, but I just flipped through the table of contents and it's almost 600 pages. So, it'll be a lengthy one, but I'm excited to get into it. So I don't know, maybe see you in a couple weeks or something. Let's get another 5-star read. So it has been a couple days of not a lot of reading, if I'm being completely honest. I started Babel. I actually started it, like I mentioned, on my Kindle, but very quickly I realized, okay, this is going to be a banger, and I'm going to want to annotate it. And so I visited a local bookshop here called Reverie. It was really cute. It was my first time there, and it's small, but it's super well stocked, and they, of course, had a copy of Babel. So I got a physical copy, and I have been still reading on my Kindle because I really like the portability of it, just how lightweight it is. The physical book, she's a thick one. But then when I find something that I really like, or I want to highlight, want to tab it, I'll go in my physical copy, make note of it. So it's been really fun to have both copies at my disposal. Anyway, about Babel. I'm only about 15% of the way in right now, and I went in like I prefer to do, a little blind. Like, obviously, this book is not like a super unknown book. R.F. Kuang is immensely popular and for good reason, and I have had a lot of people like recommend this book to me. So obviously I knew a little bit about what kind of book this was, and I also knew it had to do with language and translations. At this point in the book, we've kind of established the setting. This is like 1800s, early 1800s London, and in the first few chapters we're introduced to a little boy. He is taken from his home because there was like this big plague that was affecting his home in Canton, and all his family had died, and he was living in poverty and in sickness, and he would have died had it not been for this man, this English man that comes to save him. But we don't really know how this man is specifically connected to this kid. But there are like little hints being thrown out there that maybe that he's his father. But he comes and he rescues our protagonist, and he takes him with him on a ship to live in his estate in England. Pretty early on, we established that he's not going to be really like a parental figure to our main character, and our main character, he has a Chinese name, but Professor Lovell, that's the English man's name, he tells him, like, that's not going to fly in England, you have to pick, like, an English name. So he picks Robin Swift as his name. So our protagonist is named Robin. So Robin, he is going to basically just study his ass off. He is going to learn languages. We established pretty quickly that the main goal for his life and what he was rescued by Professor Lovell for is to eventually be admitted into Oxford, specifically into the College of Language, which is Babel. His whole childhood in England is basically spent studying voraciously Chinese, English, Greek, and Latin. So he starts learning about languages, and now at the point in the story where I'm at, he is accepted is a loose term. It seems like basically if you were a noble family, wealthy, upper class in London society, you had access to academia. So since he's connected to Professor Lovell in this way, he gets to go to Oxford. So he's starting his first semester there. We've established a few more characters. It seems like, he's going to have some friends there. There is a big mystery. He knows he's there to study language and translation, but there's like a deeper mystery of like, okay, why was I specifically chosen for this task? And there's an interesting magical realism, fantastical element in the silver. So far, it's super interesting. I mean, Rebecca F. Kwong, she's just an amazing writer, and it's very academic and like what you would expect from a dark academia. But some of the books that I've read that are like the quintessential dark academia books, like Secret History, If We Were Villains, those I think purposefully so, but a little bit annoyingly so, come off as very pretentious. And I think that's like inherent in the genre. I think dark academia is kind of exploring like these elite spaces that like not everybody has the privilege to be a part of, but some of them do so. They're like critiquing it, but the language is still very like pretentious. And in this one, that's not the case because we are coming in as Robin, who is very smart. Obviously, he has studied his whole life this topic that is not accessible to everybody, but he's coming in as an outsider. Obviously, in the 1800s, there's not a lot of diversity, not a lot of accessibility for minorities in academia or like in any other aspects of society in London. So, we're exploring that aspect of like being an outsider. And also we're looking into the power structures, the imperialism, the racism. There's a lot of layers. Obviously, I'm still very early into the novel, but like R.F. Kuang, she's already kind of establishing and laying down the tone of what this book will explore. And it seems like R.F. Kuang has really done the work. Like, she went to Oxford. Like, she is an insider in this, but I'm sure that a lot of the things that Robin is feeling, she has felt. And yeah, it's really cool so far.
Okay, I am actually working from home right now. I just had to pause and talk about this iced coffee because it is so good. This is just what I needed for this evening. I think I'm gonna finish Babel tonight. I'm very close. Everything is happening. It's very intense. And all I want to do right now is read. But capitalism, I have to work. Yeah, born to read, forced to labor. It is what it is. Hello. I finished Babel yesterday, as you saw, and I was not okay. I was completely having a breakdown. It was devastating, but so so good. And I just needed like a full almost 24 hours to sit with it. I haven't stopped thinking about it. I'm finding it hard to even articulate my feelings about this book because there's so much. It's such an ambitious book, and it was really long, but I think for like thinking back on it and like how many themes she explored and how well she deconstructed a lot of incredibly ambitious topics like colonialism, racism, academia, white fragility, intersectionality, slavery, so many things that are not easy to talk about, not easy to critique and center a story around in like a very meaningful way where you're thinking about these topics in like a critical way, but then at the same time being so engrossed and like taken by this world that she's creating and the story and the characters and the setting that she's putting you in. Just an incredible feat. With the characters of Robin, Remy, Victoire, they're very interesting and very well developed, and I loved hearing about their backstories and learning in the interludes about their history and how they came to Babel and how the empire and colonialism and racism had all impacted them in different but very heavy ways as well. But I feel like they were more straightforward because you could directly see how they were impacted and how they came to the conclusion that they had to rebel and they had to be part of the takedown of the empire. With Letty, she was a lot more complex because we saw her experiencing sexism and being discriminated against by academia and by her peers. And it was the 1830s, so being a woman in society, in academia, in this time period was not easy. Like, you were still seen as lesser than, but she didn't have the added layer of colonialism and racism against her. So she never fully felt what her closest friends and peers were feeling. And obviously we explore that a lot more. And throughout the story, I was feeling conflicted. I was having strong emotions because I was like, obviously I identify with Robin, but also I really identify with Letty. Like, I see where she's coming from. I was like, I think it's incredible that R.F. Kuang is able to write complex characters like this and explore themes of like white fragility and trying to be an ally, but at the same time like having complicated feelings about it. And I was wondering how she was gonna kind of wrap up Letty's story and involvement in everything that was going on. And I was taken aback by everything that happened. I was having conflicting emotions about it, but now that I've sat with it, I think it's brilliant, and I think that the story went in the way that it was always meant to go, and it was inevitable and heartbreaking. And it was a tough pill to swallow, but I think it makes sense, and R.F. Kuang is just incredible for being able to articulate this and make us understand why things happened the way that they did. Also just like feeling conflicting feelings about my own complicity in the systems of oppression that exist even to this day, but like grateful that I get to explore that and that all of these thoughts and feelings that I'm having are coming from this book that at the same time made me feel so warm for a while and then so devastated towards the end. So do I think this was like a 100% no flaws, perfect book? I can't say for sure right now. Like, there were moments when I was reading it where I was like, this magic system is really cool. And the way that R.F. Kuang was able to conceptualize it and explain it and tie it into translation and languages was incredible. But at the same time, it felt hard to visualize. Just the execution of it, it felt a little bit clunky at times because it wasn't just like straightforward, like there's magic in this world, like with the wave of a wand we can make stuff happen. It was very much like you have to intellectualize the way the magic works. Sometimes I was like, huh? I don't fully understand, but that could just be a me problem because I do think it was like an incredibly ambitious magic system as well. I didn't know a lot about the opium wars in China, but this made me research and it made me want to know about them. I am a product of the Texas education system, so especially when it comes to history, world history, culture, I'm learning new things every day, and I just want to say thank you to R.F. Kuang for expanding my worldview and making me excited about learning about this stuff. Probably one of my favorite books I've read this year, definitely, maybe ever. I'm still processing my thoughts clearly. I'm like a rambling mess. I don't know how to properly articulate how many feelings this brought up for me. Both good and bad. Just an incredible novel. 5 stars, clearly. I could probably nitpick some things here and there and like find reasons that I don't think it was like a perfect book. But at the end of the day, because of how ambitious it was, how well written it was, how beautiful, how heartbreaking, how powerful, how critical, how well researched, and how just an incredible writer Rebecca Kuang is, I have no choice but to give it 5 stars. And I don't know how I'm going to move on from this. I don't know how I'm supposed to read another book after this because I don't know if anything will ever live up to that. I've been just watching Love is Blind UK to balance out head full. I want to get to a head empty place before I start fully diving into another novel. I should have saved this one for last. I don't know what I was thinking, especially with it being as long as it was. I should have done the shorter books first and then tackled the long one, but I was just very excited to finally get to Babel. And now I have, and life may never be the same. I'm gonna go stare at a wall for a while and watch Love is Blind, because that's what I do when words fail me. Hello. I have been reading Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, my third and final book for this little experiment. And at first, I will admit it was a little bit of a struggle to get into it. And I don't think it's the book's fault. I think it was more just timing-wise with a lot of things going on. But today, I was able to like hunker down for a good while, and at this point I'm a little over halfway through. But also I think following up Babel, any book was going to have a hard time. Usually I don't do this type of thing where like I purposefully stack highly anticipated reads for me that like I think are going to be amazing, and especially ones that like I know are a little more in depth or talk about like heavy topics, which the 3 that I picked for this video do. Like I knew that going into it, so usually I don't pick them out like that. I'm very much like a mood reader. I just pick up whatever I'm in the mood for after I finish a book. And I think if I wasn't doing this theme for the video, after reading Babel, I probably would have picked something a lot less thought-provoking, maybe something lighthearted and fun, maybe like a cute romance or something. Just to kind of balance out like the heaviness and the density of Babel. And this one is not like Babel in most ways. It's very different genre, different writing style. It's a lot shorter. It's like a very easy read, but it is very thought-provoking. I think it's very mysterious in a different way to Babel, but also, you know, it has like an element of a mystery in there. And it is a little bit dark and emotional, and my reading has been very dark and emotional, especially since I'm concentrating on these 3 books that like I didn't consciously pick out to be very hard-hitting reads, but they are, and I guess that's just, you know, a product of what I like to read. I didn't think about how it would make me feel and how the reads would like affect each other in consecutive order. So it's, that's an interesting product of this little experiment that I've been doing. And this book, I think, is suffering a little bit because of that, because of like the emotional fallout, but also I'm comparing it and trying to rank it in my head. And just because Babel is so fresh and because Babel was like absolutely a 5-star read, like kind of a clear example of what a 5-star read is to me, I'm kind of gauging this one compared to Babel, and I don't think that's fair to this book at all because it's completely different, but I'm subconsciously doing it, and now that I'm aware that I'm doing it, I'm trying to stop myself. Any book right next to Babel is going to look a little smaller in comparison. And I mean that, figuratively and physically, this book is a lot smaller. But I'm enjoying it now. I'm like more than halfway, and it's very easy to just fly through. Let me talk about this book real quick. What this book is about is sci-fi contemporary fiction. It takes place in England in a boarding school, and it's being told in a first-person point of view. So our narrator, our protagonist, her name is Kathy, and she was raised in this boarding school, and now she's an adult. She is a carer. There are a lot of things that are just told to us, but they're not exactly explained, and they start being uncovered throughout the novel. But it's very mysterious. It's very like, you don't know what's going on, and a lot of questions that you have at the beginning that, like I said, start being answered. But Kathy is a protagonist, and it's being told as if she's telling you a story, telling you memories about her childhood. So she's recounting her days at this boarding school called Hailsham, where she had a group of friends. The other two main characters that we're focusing on are Ruth and Tommy. These were her friends and kids she grew up with at this boarding school. In a lot of ways, it's very straightforward. She's just telling you about her childhood, about growing up, about what it was like to grow up at Hailsham. But there's clearly something going on that you're not supposed to fully understand, but that she kind of is going into. She tells us at the beginning of the book that she is a carer, and that there are other people that come from Hailsham and other people that don't, but that she is caring for that are donators. And we learn pretty quickly that these people that she's caring for are donating their organs. To who, for what reason, we still don't know, but we know that those are somehow tied to her growing up at this facility, and that the story is kind of centered around the school and what they were kind of being raised and told, and also what they weren't being told and had to figure out throughout their lives about themselves and the kind of lives that they would lead eventually. I know this is sounding very vague and not making a lot of sense, but it's because that's how it's told to you. It's like very straightforward, but not very informative. Like I said before, I have seen the movie. I really liked it when I was in high school, but I've only watched it the once. So I remember some elements of it, but there are things that I still have questions about that I don't quite remember from the movie. And obviously this is going a lot more detailed, a lot more in depth than a 2-hour movie can. So I'm really enjoying it so far. I think it's a very interesting and compelling read, and I love a good mystery. I love like just being along for the ride and not really knowing what's going on. Like I said, try not to compare it to Babel, because Babel was like so expansive and it dealt with so many serious topics, and it was like worldwide and historical, and this one is contemporary, and it's like dealing with a very insular group. It feels a lot more isolated and specific. So just very different, and I don't think I'm doing it any favors by comparing it to the extraordinary feat that Babel is. I'm enjoying this one, but don't recommend reading any book after Babel. Hello, please excuse the wet hair. I just took a shower and I don't know when I'll be able to do another check-in after today because I've got some medical stuff coming up, so I'll be out of commish for a few days. But I finished Never Let Me Go just in time. I flew through the last section of it today, and yeah, I got through it this evening, and y'all, I am so emotionally depleted. I didn't plan it this way, but the 3 books that I set aside and said, I think these will be 5 stars, let me finally get around to reading them, for some reason were just very emotionally heavy. And I think that is indicative of the kind of books that I really enjoy. I am a sad girl through and through. I love exploring the human condition. I love sad things. I love sad songs. I love sad movies. I love the bittersweetness of life. These 3 books back to back have just kind of taken it out of me. So yeah, not by design, but I think it's interesting and just kind of a side effect of this here experiment. But anyway, let me give you my thoughts on Never Let Me Go. Freshly finished, and it's a quick read. It's very engaging. It's a little slow, but there's the mystery element underlying everything, so that makes it really interesting and it makes you want to figure out what's going on. So it's kind of like a page turner in that sense because you just want to get to the core of what is happening. But the actual plot and the things happening in the book aren't super exciting. It's not a thriller. Like I mentioned, it's told mostly through Kathy's memories, and it's broken up into 3 parts. So the first section is mostly her talking about her kind of early childhood into adolescence, growing up at this boarding school, and it's developing the relationships of the 3 central characters, Kathy, Ruth, and Tommy, and we kind of see their dynamic develop and then change over time. And then the second part is once they're, I think, either 17 or 18, at that point they leave Hailsham and they all go to live together at kind of like these co-op houses where it's not a school anymore. They don't have lessons, they don't have guardians. They're all just kind of living together and doing chores and interacting with each other. And Tommy, Ruth, and Kathy all go to live at the same home with other Hailsham students, and then some people who are like them. They are being raised to be donors. Oh my god, side note, I'm still reeling at the fact that I said donators before and didn't even catch it and didn't even think twice about it. That is so embarrassing. They're being raised to be donors. So they're kind of living with other people for the first time, and we see that play out. And then their relationships and like their complicated kind of friendships that they have continue to be explored. And then the third part is at some point all of these people have to move on to this phase where they're actually gonna start making donations. But before that, they all have to go through this phase of being carers. So the carers are basically people who are accompanying the people who are at the donation phase, see them every day, as they're going through their medical procedures, and they just are like a friendly face and company for them as they're going through this phase in their life. And then it seems kind of like it depends on your preference how long you'll be a carer for before moving on to the donation phase. So Kathy is in the cure phase of her trajectory right now. And in the final chapters, the final section of the book, we're kind of exploring that and what has happened since leaving the group home, the cottages. There isn't any major twist in the entire story. You kind of see where it's headed. You kind of realize things a lot sooner than these characters do. So it's not, the reveal at the end isn't so much for you as it is for Kathy and the characters in the story. And it's more to see how they change their actions based on this reveal and realization, and just to see how they work through it emotionally. So mostly this story is about the human condition. It's very interesting because we see people growing up very isolated, very sheltered, and I think the story is trying to explore things that are innate to us just as humans. Like, if we exist in a vacuum, like, do we still develop emotions? Do we still have individual personalities? Do we still feel love, empathy, fear? Do we still have a soul, basically, is what I think Kazuo Ishiguro is exploring and making us think about. There's questions about ethics and morality and death and humanity, but we're just being told the story. We're not being pushed one way or another. We're not being told what to feel, what to think. And it's very interesting how he develops these characters, because we get like a very in-depth look at their emotional, or at least from Kathy's point of view, we get an in-depth look at how she thinks and all the emotions that she feels, but at the same time they are very secluded from the outside world, and they don't have a lot of frames of reference of like what is normal, what everybody else is feeling and thinking. So it's a very interesting concept, and you see them kind of come up with like their own assumptions and their own kind of rules about society and human interaction. So I thought that was really interesting. And a lot of the times they're feeling like very strong things, but they don't have anything to anchor that feeling to, or they haven't been given the tools to internalize some of these feelings and determine what they mean. So they kind of just acknowledge them, but then they don't talk them out with each other. They kind of just let them linger or blow over. And I can imagine in a situation like this where the only people you've ever known your entire life is the people that you're having to spend all your time with. I can see how that would get very complicated, and it would be hard to parse out emotionally. So yeah, I enjoyed it. It is very bittersweet. It is very emotional, and it's very beautiful and very like dreamlike. There's nothing very complicated about it. And like I said, you're not being led to believe one thing over another. It's just a story being told to you. So I think that's also what made it like a very quick read. But I don't know if I would consider it a 5-star. I don't think it hit me or made me think or feel as much as obviously Babel, but then also Notes on an Execution was a lot more hard-hitting for me. Maybe it's just a product of I've been feeling so many emotions reading all these books back to back that like I'm running low on fumes. But it also, I think, is because I kind of knew what to expect from it, because I saw the movie a long time ago, but I do remember it. It's a lot more detailed than the movie is. I think if I wouldn't have seen the movie, I would have gotten more enjoyment out of the book, just trying to figure out what was going on before they tell you specifically. So I think it was a product of a few different things. It was just missing like a little bit of oomph for me. So I think I would give it 4 stars, maybe 4.5, because I did really enjoy it, but it was just, it doesn't reach the 5-star level for me. But the other 2 definitely did. And I think overall, a successful experiment. I think I learned that I can pretty much trust my intuition about a book and also trust sources. I think a lot of these recommendations also come from like seeing people that I like and respect and know that I have similar tastes to really like these books. So I'll keep doing that. I'll keep trusting my sources. But yeah, this was very fun, but I think in the future I won't stack up ones that I have very, very high hopes for like this. I won't let them linger in my TBR for too long, because what I've learned is that back to back, they can get very emotionally trying. And I need some things in between. I need a little palate cleanser. So yeah, let me know if you've read any of these, if you agree with my ratings, if you have also given them 5 stars, or if you have absolutely hated them and had a lot more valid critiques about them that I did. Thanks for coming along for this. I am going to go watch some more Love is Blind, because that is exactly the kind of mess that I need after these books. I just need a reminder that like, it's not that serious. So yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!